Okay. My name is Bob. I asked the Lord why I'm involved. Is responsible for figuring all that. And I think that many of you are here for different reasons. You're probably here because you don't like what's going on. What can I do? So I appreciate everyone coming today to the town hall. The town must be out there, and this must be the hall. So I just am so glad you're here. I pray that you'll be blessed. We've got our legislators have come today, and they'll be sharing what's going on. It might be a little difficult to hear, but we've got a helper. And I want to thank of our local Republican Party. I want to thank the Project Victory event people to put this on today. And so I am opening with a prayer, but before I start praying, I'm going to make a declaration. I'm going to declare something over all of us. I declare that God is our refuge and our strength, and an ever-present help in time of trouble. We are living in a time of trouble, but guess what? God is our refuge and our strength. Amen. And as I pray, I'm going to ask you if you consider, as I pray, that to the best of your ability, that you turn your hearts towards God. So if you don't mind doing that right now, the best you can if you want. Thank you, God, for your incredible love expressed through Jesus. Thank you for your faithfulness and your forgiveness. Father God, I'm asking you that you would send the Holy Spirit into this room right now and start filling every heart. We desperately need you. Let the joy of the Lord rise up in each one of us to strengthen us. Show each one of us what we should be doing as we move forward behind you in this battle against evil, deception, and lies. Let us be filled with your love, and may your light quickly dispel darkness. Let God arise and our enemies be scattered. Amen. Save this nation. Save this state. Save the unborn. Rescue the children. Set us free from oppression and remove ungodly leaders. Yeah. Let your truth prevail. Anoint and empower the people and the leaders you are raising up, and let us move forward with expectation. I pray a blessing over each and every one of you, and may God's will be done. And now we will say the Pledge of Allegiance. Amen. In Jesus' name, amen. This is what it's all about, folks. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now I'd like to introduce Ms. Patzner.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Deborah Patzner. I'm from Northwest Rochester here in Olmsted County, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the legislators that we have with us today. I'm going to start with ladies first. So we have Senator Carla Nelson. Carla and her husband Terry have lived in Rochester for over 40 years, raised 3 sons, own a small business called Olmsted Financial Group, and they now have 2 wonderful granddaughters. Carla attended her first caucus in 1990 and was elected as a delegate to the Olmsted County Convention. In the years following, she was elected to the Executive Committee, 1st District, and State Conventions and State Central. Carla volunteered for many campaigns across southeast Minnesota. She was elected to 1 term in the House of Representatives in 2002 and then elected to the Senate in 2010. She was re-elected to the Senate in 2012, 2016, 2020, and 2022. Carla served as whip, assistant minority leader, education chair, and most recently, tax chair. As tax chair, she authored $4 billion in tax cuts, no tax increases, and forged agreement with Democrat-controlled tax chair. Unfortunately, the House did not take up the agreement, and the session ended in stalemate. Carla is known as a hardworking legislator and campaigner who serves her constituents well. Welcome, Carla. And next we have Representative Dwayne Quam. Dwayne was born in southeast Minnesota and grew up on a local farm. He has degrees in engineering and physics. He has worked on designing and developing new products. Dwayne has also served on the Byron School Board and the ZED Governing Board. Dwayne was elected to the Minnesota State House of Representatives in 2011. His wife's name is Pat. They have 2 sons and 2 wonderful grandsons. Ironically, there are 4 Dwayne Quams in Olmsted County, and none of them are related to him. Excuse me, all of them are related to him. My bad. Welcome, Dwayne. And last but certainly not least, we have Senator Steve Drazkowski. Steve grew up in a family of 5 boys on a family farm south of Fountain City, Wisconsin. He has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Agriculture from the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, Master's in Education in Agricultural Education from the University of Minnesota, along with 14 years as a county-based extension educator with the University of Minnesota. Steve was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives in a special election in 2007. He was a 15-year member of the Minnesota House, served 4 years as chair of the Property Tax Committee. He has leadership positions had leadership positions in 2 different House Republican caucuses. Steve was elected to the Minnesota Senate in November of 2022. He serves on Tax Committee as well as the State and Local Government, Finance, and Veterans Committees. He owns and operates Baker's Shoes, his family's 99-year-old retail shoe business located in Winona, Minnesota. Steve is married to his wife Laura. They have 1 daughter and 1 wonderful granddaughter. Steve loves hunting and fishing. Welcome, Steve. And now you just join me in a huge round of applause for all these wonderful legislators joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Rick Nolting, and I'll be moderating today. In order to be fair, we're going to have everybody who wants to ask a question write their question down. We have special sheets of paper so that nobody can salt in extra questions. Everybody gets 1. We're going to put them in a hat, draw the question out, and we'll just keep going until we run out of time. So that way it'll be as fair as possible. We thought about not having written questions, that I would just pick on somebody, but then I might be accused of cherry picking questions. So that's not going to happen. We're going to make it as fair as possible. So all the folks are going to start passing out papers. Write your questions down when we get to the question and answer period. First, we're going to have our legislators speak for about 10 minutes apiece, and then we'll get to the questions, go on from there. Any order you want. Senator Drazkowski.
Give it to me, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Awesome. Spring is coming. Summer's coming. Is spring here yet? The calendar is on our side, okay? And God is on our side. And even though we've been seeing what we've been seeing, really the assault on freedom, the assault on families, the assault on life, the assault on morality, the assault on our wallets, the assault on our guns is coming. this Democrat majority, you guys, is like the bull is in the china shop. His head is down. He's knocking over each exhibit one at a time, and he's going to end it by crashing out the window and jumping out. That's almost what it seems like to me. They just don't care, and they are just dead set on their agenda and just believe so much in their ideology that they want to ingrain as much of it into our laws as possible. And I can tell you the first week in the legislature, usually day 2 is reserved for what I like to call the Kumbaya Day. The Democrats started this 12 or 14 years ago now. And what it was is you get together with people from the University of Minnesota and from other leftist organizations, and they try to teach you on how to feel good about each other and get along across the aisle and all kinds of kumbaya stuff. Of course, I've never gone to them, but it was dedicated to that. They dedicated that second day of session to that. No meetings, no nothing in the legislature. So I always skipped and stayed back and was working on stuff in my office. This year, the same party who started that tradition called it off and said, we are having meetings and we are working and we're getting our agenda through. Now, back that up with the Easter break, which we just finished. This year it was 5 days. Normally it's like 8 or 9 days. And so these are just examples of what they're doing in order to buy as much time and move things through as quickly as possible. And I can tell you, they're managing the calendar very well. They are efficient with their time. They are in complete agreement from one house to another, to the governor, and their strategy is to pass the bills through on first passage so that they match the language in the other house. Don't allow any amendments on it when it goes through, so that it matches the language in the other house. And then when it passes the second house, it can go directly to the governor. No need for conference committee and another pass through each house like normally happens with a lot of bills. If there's amendments on them, that takes too much time. And so they're very efficient in doing that, and you've seen them come through. The veracity of their agenda can best be described in House File 1 and Senate File 1. And when the new majority takes over, they usually reserve their first 10 bills for their most important items. House File and Senate File 1 was a bill to allow abortion up until the point of birth. Unfettered, unrestricted abortion up to the point of birth. Now, it's amazing. They claimed that the overturning of Roe versus Wade was, Republicans going wild in their ideology, which it was not. But their response to that was Democrats go wild in their ideology, and they passed it through in a way that not many people in Minnesota support. Very, very few. It's a very small number. So that's we've got a lot of bills we can talk about, where they're going. The gun control stuff is coming. They passed it through the House now. Universal background checks, or universal gun registration, as most of us like to call it, because we know that when you require background checks of everybody throughout the spectrum of gun ownership, that equates to the ability for government to have registration of firearms. And so that was in the bill, in the public safety bill in the House, as was the red flag laws, the red flag gun confiscation laws, where the first time you know that the government is interested in you and your gun is when they knock on your door and come asking for them. Those two major violations of our Second Amendment passed through the House, and maybe Representative Quam can talk about what happened in that debate. But they did not bring it through the Senate. And I suspect what's going to happen is they're going to go to conference committee. The Senate Public Safety Bill does not have it in. The House Public Safety Bill does have it in. Those two bills then go to conference committee, and they decide in conference committee, which is going to be controlled by Democrats. They'll decide whether or not to have it in the final bill. Then it goes back to both houses for final passage. And so we will be seeing that. In the Senate, and Representative Quam can talk about the House, but in the Senate, there is a one-seat Democrat majority. And so that's the place, if we're going to stop stuff, that it can happen. Because all it takes is one Democrat to vote with us. Just one, as long as all of our guys and gals stick together. So that's kind of the background of where we're at. A lot of bad stuff. The blackout bill, which you heard about, where they're going to mandate energy come from windmills and solar panels, and petroleum-based energy is outlawed and by 2040. By the way, an economist suggested that if that happens in January of 2040, we can expect 55-hour blackouts in Minnesota. So that's not real congruent with living here. So anyway, that's a little bit of the background. There's all kinds of bad stuff we can talk about. But in terms of what can we do, we need to let people know what is going on. The people have to hear what they are doing to us. Unfortunately, what happens a lot of times is they don't realize, the people don't realize it until it affects them. And then the first time they say, well, how did this change? What happened here? It's our job to let them know. The sooner we can get the populace to know how radical and out of control that these Democrats are, the sooner that they're going to start to slow down and meter it back, because they're going to have to, because otherwise they're going to get kicked out of the House in the election in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Two housekeeping things. We're going around with a basket to collect the questions, and then I'd also ask you to silence your cell phones. Senator Nelson.
Thank you. I will silence my cell phone. There you go. Well, it is really great to be with you today, and what a joy to see so many people here. And before I appreciate having 10 minutes to talk about the horrendous things that are happening at the Capitol, so that you know, as Senator Drazkowski said. But I also want to thank the organizers today. I really tip my hat to the Project Victory, the Olmsted County Events Committee. I know Rebecca Springer has been very helpful in working with my calendar to get me here today. And of course, Dr. Nolting, so thank you for showing up today. It's enlightening, and it brings joy to the soul to see so many concerned Minnesotans right here in Olmsted County. So I just thank you for that. So, as you know, I'm Senator Nelson. Before I start on really the important pieces, and just kind of elaborating on some of the things that Senator Drazkowski already shared with you, I did want to let you know, because I know some of you contacted me, and I appreciate that. You contacted me and asked a question that was kind of a burning question for you, and a number of people said, whoa, Carla, we missed your vote on, I think, last week, last Friday, and where were you when these horrendous, they didn't say horrendous, but I will say horrendous bills were before the Senate. And as you know, we all have lives outside of the Senate. And I was with some medical appointments that I could not change. Now, it would have been easy. In fact, I thought about just passing my menu to the person who reads the remote votes, saying I vote no, no, no. I definitely could have done that on every bill. All the amendments in between might have been a bit more difficult. But, you know, I've kind of I don't like this remote voting, quite frankly. I think we need to return to people in the chamber voting present, or not voting present, but being present and voting yes or no. And so I've just made it a point that I will not surrender my vote to party bosses. Some people do that, I will not. So when I vote, you will know that I am voting because I'm hearing the bill, I'm hearing what's said on the floor, and I'm listening to the amendments. So I was not able to vote on those bills, but I would have liked to have. Many of you know me, we've worked together for 15 years on many of these issues, and I have a very long history of standing for life, traditional values, traditional marriage, and supporting our children. You might remember years ago, and not that many years ago, 2 sessions ago, when I was the education chair. I was the first one who brought forth the academic balance bill because our kids were not receiving, they were not receiving just the education that they needed, they were also receiving some manipulating about different ideologies. And how did I know about that before it hit the press? You know how I knew about that? Because parents told me about it. Parents were telling me, Carla, you won't believe what's happening in my daughter's government class. And then they went on to explain some of those things. So I've always led on those issues. I would have loved to have been there to cast my red vote on 3 of those really horrible bills that do not respect life and do not respect traditional values and morals. However, I just wanted to get that out there so you knew. Even the Star Trib actually called to say, where's Senator Nelson? And there were several other absences too. I appreciated people calling and asking about that, and hopefully, well, the challenge is, I think these things are, well, they're baked in right now, and we will just have to get a complete sea change to change those. And unfortunately, as Senator Drazkowski mentioned, even if all of our Republican senators had been present, those very dangerous bills would have passed. And so there was not anything, unfortunately. So this is my overarching story today that I want you to think about. We need just one more Republican in the Senate. So please never think your vote doesn't matter. It does. This is what's happening. The one vote in the Senate was flipped from Republican to Democrat by less than 200 votes. So 200 votes is what has now lurched our state with the full DFL trifecta severely to the left. We've mentioned some of those things. Let's just talk about the budget, for example. When I was tax chair last year, we had a $12 billion budget surplus. And I was given a target of $4 billion of tax relief. We did that, got the House, which was controlled by Democrats at the time, the House Democrat tax chair to agree to $4 billion of tax relief and no tax increases. Now, unfortunately, as you know, the House refused to take that up, or they said they were kind of holding it hostage for these other unrelated bills over there. That was the Democrat-controlled House. So we didn't get that tax relief yet. But this year, now, as you know, when we came into session, it was a $19.5 billion budget surplus. It had grown. Now, one of the first bills that Governor Walz signed into law was to immediately suck out $1.5 billion of that and put it onto the budget forecast for automatic inflation. How many of you get automatic inflation on your paychecks? No, none of us do. Our costs are going up, but our paychecks are stagnant, but not your government's paychecks, or not your government's costs, $1.5 billion there. So even then, with a $17.5 billion surplus, I was glad to see that the tax committee, which I'm not chairing now as a minority member, we have a Democrat chair, got a $4 billion target of tax relief. I'm thinking, oh, that's good news. So I was pretty excited when that came through our Senate omnibus in the tax committee. Unfortunately, yes, and you'll hear them say this, it's the largest tax relief bill in the history of our state. But they're forgetting the rest of the story. The rest of the story is that there are over $2 billion of tax increases in that bill. At a time when we have massive surplus, it's ridiculous. And the one thing that I heard at the door over and over and have continued to hear is, why are we continuing to tax Social Security benefits as income? I've carried that bill for years. It was part of that agreement with the House, by the way, to finally get rid of that, just like 39 other states do. However, the bill that is working its way through the legislature now does not fully exempt Social Security from taxation as income. The governor and his friends are saying that, oh, those rich people don't need that funding. Of course, then we have new things like licenses for all. I want you to notice that but it's even, there's something good about having everybody on the road driving with a license, I get that. But here's the problem. The elections bill that came through just this week, allows you to register to vote automatically every time you get a license. So think about that. It also includes forever absentee balloting. So once you request an absentee ballot, you can check the box and you'll get one every year. Of course, I hear about that when I visit people and they say, you know, it's really sad, Carla. I keep getting these absentee ballots for my husband and he died 4 years ago. Could you please make them stop sending those here? So there's just a lot of things. We need more Republicans. I'm glad we have more time to talk. I think Naomi's telling me I'm almost at the end of my talk. We have many more things we can talk about. Paid family leave, tax increases, but stay tuned. I hope we'll get to cover it today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Representative Wong.
Well, I let the senators go first so that they would cover a lot of the stuff, because there's so much. But the discussion about the taxes total across all the bills, there's 9.5 billion in increased fees and taxes. There's only a couple that's stuck in the tax bill, but just about every other major funding bill has something that takes your money and they spend it. Standing up there, you hear a lot of sound bites and, wow, look at, this is where we're going to. It sounds good. On the farm, and I've told some of you this before, on the farm, you learn quick not to do stupid. Because you have to do a lot of work to fix it, and it costs more to fix it. And frankly, the first thing you're considering new legislation is look at where it's been done before. Now, California, because of its beautiful climate, the beaches, there's oil and all these other resources there, they've got an easy route. And they're in a huge mess. And they're in a huge mess because of stupid things they've done. So when I see us trying to copy California, and oftentimes exceed in the stupidity of California, I try to point that out. I don't think I've used on the House floor the title of the other party. I try to address issues, logic, reason, and the gun bill is a good example of, oh, we've got to do these common sense things. Well, let's look exactly where they've been implemented and have they done any difference? Because when you do something that's not going to be effective, you delay actually fixing and addressing the issue. And they don't seem to understand that. We're going to do something, oh, I feel good because it sounds good, but it does nothing. And then years go by and you do something else that feels good but doesn't solve the problem. We need solutions to problems. And that comes from listening to people that have to go through the, well, we used to clean it out of the barn, mandates and things that force you to waste time, waste energy, waste resources that don't do anything to help. And if we're going to keep people in our state, we've got an out-migration, we're in the top 10 for out-migration, that we've got to actually realize, even though the flooding along North Dakota. We don't have a moat around the entire state. And that what matters to business people and workers and families is how is it here and is there a better place? Because every time you hit tough times, you think about what are your options? And one option that a lot of workers are doing is moving to other states. And what that does when businesses and workers move to the other states is that the proportionality of workers goes down. Mayo and a lot of medical entities, they see that as the proportionality of government programs goes up, there's cost shifting, but you can't get above a certain amount before you reach a point of where you're financially unstable. And we're going to hit that. So unless you want to break our system, we've got to start doing things smarter. And you bring that up on the House floor, and they'll often say, well, we didn't get to hear that bill. It should be done in committee. Oh, we like that idea, but we're not going to include it in our bill. And that's what's killing these bills is there's always two sides, and if you get the best of both sides, we're better off. But unfortunately, the proportionality of people wanting to copy California and the majority is big enough to where they see it as a competition. And we're exceeding the failed policies and programs in other states. You pick your issue, and it's like, let's go with EVs. If we went fully electric vehicles in the state of Minnesota, we'd need about a third more electricity. Now, or more, it depends on, but I took the total number of vehicles, I took the total electricity being utilized in megawatt hours across the entire year. And I said if we stayed the same. But that doesn't count the fact that they don't want us to heat our homes with natural gas and the petroleum products, and that's potentially a greater need of electricity. So if you're going to go with solar and wind, which only have a portion of the day, of the hours in a day of where they're producing, you're going to have to store it. And in case you haven't noticed, there have been issues with battery storage. I remember reading articles about in Japan where they went early on it, they would have buildings catching fire because they had huge battery storage. Boeing had a jet that got delayed because of issues with the battery storage. So again, I also looked at the total number of acreage, and they used beautiful, tillable acreage for it. So you're taking out cropland. So that's the type of logic and reason that I put forward, and they say, oh, we'll have to talk about that in committee sometime. Well, I've got bills addressing multiple different issues that never get a hearing. And when they bring their bills up and they're stupid in it, I've asked questions. And they frequently don't like to answer those. So can you restate it? They go back and forth. There was in HHS, there was a question, Planned Parenthood was doing stuff, and they had a medical doctor testifying. I said, how many Planned Parenthood facilities are licensed medical facilities? And they heed and hawed 4 times as if it was a hard question to answer. And then they finally answered, no. So they don't like being hit with the truth. Some of you I have seen in committee. Some of you have come up and testified, and it scares them and puts them off base by seeing conservative people, regular Minnesota citizens coming up and voicing their voice. Because they think, oh, it's only our people that are ever voicing. They're picketing, demonstrating. Well, a lot of you guys, actually, it's called work, isn't it? And it's called families. And we have priorities. We're at a juncture in time of where a priority needs to have your voices heard. And I want to thank you before they yank me off.
Thank you, Representative Plum. We have our questions. We have them sorted. Okay. Turn in your questions. Who hasn't turned in their questions? Thank you. Actually, I'm going to do it the way I said I was going to do it. I'm going to have somebody pick a question out of this.
There's stacked in order of topic.
Can any of you comment on proposal bills about national popular vote for Minnesota's proposed changes to how we elect our president? Representative Kwong first, and then we'll go to Senator Nelson.
My base principle is that our electors for Minnesota should only be determined by the voters and citizens of the state of Minnesota. And we were formed, it was the states that set up and created the federal government. And we've got the U.S. Senate, which is equality for every state, and the House is by population. And that balance allows states to have a stronger say individually, but it also prevents a high population minority portion of the country from dominating. But my principle is only Minnesota votes should determine where our electors go.
Well, we can second that totally. And you might say, why is it that anyone is pushing these bills? Well, on the Senate floor, we're not allowed to impugn motives. I'm not going to impugn motives, but I'm going to just pass a few facts out to you today. The issue is silencing the voice of our states that are least densely populated. And if you think about that, that would mean turning our state's choice for president, turning over the election of the presidents of the United States to only some states, basically. And you know in your mind already what those are. You know about New York, Florida, California. Those are the big states that would have an outsized impact in determining our national elections. I'm rather shocked. This idea has been around for a long time. It seems to surface to the top more when Republicans are not in control of any chamber. But I would say I think it's extremely dangerous, and I can't really even wrap my mind around how it would be constitutional. So I hope that this is one thing that we can stop, in this session. Many of these items that we're going to talk about, or we have been talking about, really have lasting impacts regarding voting, which is so important. So I'd encourage you to reach out if you have more questions, but I would be a firm no on this.
I'm going to expand a little bit on what these two legislators had to say. We have the elections bill before us in the Senate, and it had national popular vote in it. It did, didn't it, Carla?
It did. We wanted to take it out.
Okay, we did. And I wasn't talking about that part of the bill. And yeah, what these two had to say is, I mean, exactly right. It benefits Democrats. And so their entire election bill was written to benefit Democrats. Whether you included the part that said government was going to put the registration of voters on autopilot, which is in the bill as well. So where government's going to be an activist organization to actively register voters using government's machinery to do it, or the lifetime absentee ballot program. So you sign up once and you get an absentee ballot every single year. No matter, you know, you may have already moved 4 times. It's still going to that address, ladies and gentlemen, because it benefits Democrats. Or the part that I was arguing on the floor, they had a piece in there to limit corporate contributions to BPOUs and party units, etc., because they wanted to keep out foreign influence from elections and stop laundering of money through elections. Of course, I had amendments to do the same for unions and nonprofits. So something we could agree on that if we did all 3, right? But they only wanted to benefit Democrats. And that's what they're doing. They're trying to stack the deck. They're trying to make future elections even better for them. And that's what they're doing in these election bills.
All right, thank you. Next, we have questions for each of the individual legislators. So we're going to go one legislator at a time, and then we have a stack that is a question for all of them. Then we'll go to that next. So first, I think this is for Senator Nelson. Who wants to pick a question for him?
Yes, and the winner is? What?
Winner is, the Democrats are touting their tax bill as the biggest tax cut ever. What taxes are they cutting?
Oh, I am so glad you asked. So here's the good part of their bill. It includes most of the tax cuts that I had in my tax bill last year. So it does provide some good things. It allows more Minnesotans to not have to pay taxes on Social Security income. Doesn't go all the way, like mine did. It does provide property tax relief because, well, property taxes have been soaring with increased valuations. And so there's pieces in there that will allow you to have more valuation of your home before you start paying property taxes on that. It also increases the rebate for the property tax rebate. So there are some good things with property taxes there. It also includes some important pieces like the pass-through entity, which is kind of convoluted, but I would just tell you this: it allows Minnesota businesses to reduce their taxes by a significant amount. I won't say the number without looking at it again. And it doesn't impact the state treasury, which is quite a win-win. When you can reduce Minnesota income taxes and not reduce money coming into the state treasury. It all has to do with conforming to some previous federal legislation regarding pass-through entities and the SALT cap, if you're following any of those tax things. So there are some good things like that. There are some good things for our farmers, making sure that they can have an easier way to pass on their farmland to beginning farmers. So there's a number of good provisions in there. But as I mentioned, there are some clunkers in there too. And so it's $4 billion to the good but $2 billion of tax hikes. And this is hard to imagine in a time when we have a massive surplus. I would say one of those tax hikes is so egregious, I know it cannot happen. It is called the mandatory worldwide reporting. No other state is doing it. Even the fact that Minnesota had a bill introduced for that has led to embassies from other countries calling to see what is happening here, and it could cause incredible issues, although I just cannot imagine it passing. They're so desperate for money. I think it is just a placeholder on the spreadsheet, but the problem is it's in both the House and the Senate. I think what they should do is make it an election like they have in other states, which means it's for multinational corporations that have businesses all across the world, and Minnesota is trying to tax those down. Can you imagine that? That's what this is doing. But they should make it an election. There's a few other states that have done that. The businesses will figure out, well, is it better to pay the worldwide mandatory, or is it better to pay Minnesota tax? It should be an election. At this point, it's not. I will be working as things move through conference committee to either strip that out or make it an election.
Thank you. Next one will be for Representative Kwong. Give you equal opportunity to you folks here in the second and third row. Please just pick out a question, any one of those. You like that one? Okay. Representative Kwong, when will the conservatives in Minnesota realize, and they're talking about the representatives and senators, we cannot coexist with communists and socialists, and that the end goal is our termination according to history?
Well,
It's true.
The only thing not mentioned there was Satan.
Well, you said Marxist. You said Marxist, so.
you know, I'm much better with science and numbers, but I think when the people, which are you in the audience, speak up and are no longer afraid to be heard, and you're with different groups of people, you know, not so much at work, but at church, at social, other places around, when something comes up, be not afraid to pull the truth out of your back pocket and speak it. And speak it from your heart, not with words that are part of a script that major media, they all have the same script, but from your heart, because people can know that it's the truth that's in your heart. And that is when it will change, because there's a lot of people that aren't paying much attention. They glance at things on social media or the regular media, and they're accepting that. But when they have their neighbors and people that they've known for years saying, hey, that's not right, then they start thinking and questioning. And when they're thinking on their own is when the light bulb will go on and things will change. So it's you and us together that'll make it happen.
Thank you. Now, Senator Drazkowski. Yes. Thank you. You need your crystal ball for this one. Will a Republican win a statewide election again? I'm concerned about voter fraud in Minnesota. Are we being sure ballot harvesting, early voting, and mail-in voting aren't done fraudulently?
Well, we know they are. And so it's good to know what you got, right? And that's where we as Republicans are at. I mean, and I mentioned this on the Senate floor, and some of my liberal Metro member colleagues' eyes popped out of their head, I'm sure, but I talked about Levon Mohammed and 300 ballots in his car, and the fact that I was the one that got the video from a young gal in Minneapolis that shared it with the FBI in Project Veritas, and then they stopped their gallivanting around the rhetoric about, oh, we have such wonderful, beautiful elections in Minnesota and they're all secure as they can be. So we have to point out those realities. The reality is you can vote in Minnesota 46 days before the election, and they've been taking advantage on the other side fully of those. I've been helping in 2 years ago in the election in Rosemount. I was helping with the House election. And the Democrat opponent, who was a member of the House, John Hewitt, and Jeremy Munson and I walked up to his house and knocked on his door. And he had just woke up and his fly was open too. We got a picture, by the way. We got a picture. It was funny. It was funny. But we said, John, we've been out door knocking for your opponent in your neighborhood here, and we think she's gonna win. And he said, no. I already know we have enough ballots in the bank already. That's what he said 2.5 years ago. I already know we got enough in the bank, I've been told. So their unions, etc., are out there working and organizing around elections. They've been doing this for probably a decade or more. They get better and better at it each time, and that is having their universe of information, their universe of voters, and ticking them off one at a time, calling, is your ballot in yet, and making certain, and then they mark them off and they're out of the universe and they go to the next one. And we have to figure out how to do it. If we don't figure out how to do it, the idea of simply persuading people and persuading the electorate that your ideas are better than theirs, that's important, but that alone is not going to win us elections anymore, because they are doing this mechanically throughout the election, and we've got to figure out how to do it too, or every one of us is going to be leaving this state at some point. So anyway, we got to work hard and figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll take a question for all the legislators. I'll come over here. I need the exercise. Ms., please pick a question. Doesn't matter what you want. Thank you very much. Question is there any way to defeat House File 1715 and Senate File 1849? Democrats want to ban the sale of, I don't know if I can read that. It's spark ignited gasoline powered engines under 25 horsepower, riding lawnmowers, chainsaws, and among others.
One senator. I think that's what it comes down to in people contacting. There are a small list of senators who are in districts that feel more like the people sitting here. And bringing up the volume is the hope to change it. Unfortunately, the very progressive wing of the majority in the House is driving most of the stuff. And you can see it on there are several members of the majority that they're ashamed of the way they're voting, but they're just voting that way. But in the Senate, where it's one, that's where the hope lies.
Dwayne is right. It's up to the voters who's ever in those Senate desks and those House desks. And the one thing I would say, I do not believe that bill has had a hearing yet. So you might take a little sigh of relief, but make it very brief, because it can come up at any time. It just has to go through Rules Committee. And the other thing it's important to note is all of the bills this year are still alive for next session. So we really have to be on guard. And to Representative Quam's point about what's happening in the Senate, I'm going to stray off topic just a minute to illustrate what is happening there with that one vote. Friday night, we had legalizing marijuana on the Senate floor. I'm hoping we get to talk about that. There's a lot to say about that. But what I would say is that they did not have their own votes lined up, and they literally had to take a recess in the middle of the presentation. And what they did during that recess, now this is unheard of. I've been in the Senate for what, 13 years now? Never seen it before. They went into recess. Obviously they had to corral another vote. You know, I kind of know who it was, I think. And they came back, and here's what's interesting. That senator offered an amendment to this bill that's already gone through 14 committees and 50 amendments to add $10 million for things that, yes, should have been done. But what does that make you think? It tells you the bill was premature, it wasn't ready, they just brought it to the floor. In fact, we had thought originally it was going to come next year. We're not sure why it came so early. But they, because they're the majority, because of that one seat, they were able to go to that one senator who should not be voting to legalize marijuana if he were representing his people. But they gave him an amendment, a $10 million amendment to say, well, we're going to add this to the bill to make it better. So it is all about the votes, folks. We cannot emphasize enough how important it is to stay involved and really work to get more Republicans elected. And I will just tell you, I cannot tell you how many times I have sat at my desk on the Senate floor, you know, my heart's sick, and yet I think what I wouldn't do for one more Republican senator in the Senate. It makes a huge difference. That means you make a huge difference. So thanks for letting me stray off a little bit, but very important.
You don't have enough money to pay somebody off.
Well, no, this is your money. I'm telling you, this $10 million was your money. It's just, I don't have the majority to shift it around like that. Yeah, exactly.
All right, Senator Drazkowski, your comment on this one?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to pass. And the reason is because it affects too many people, and the people have just an immediate visceral reaction to it. I think it's low enough on their list, but the same progressive people in both chambers that Representative Quam talked about, that's their far out wacky ideas in order to control us. But I think as soon as that comes up for hearing, and I think it did in the House. Did you have a hearing in the House, Dwayne? On it? Okay. It may have been heard in the House, and that was probably enough to give them a taste of what visceral reaction that the people had to it, and it isn't going to happen. I don't think it's going to go anywhere in the Senate. But keep on it, because you know they'll try. But keep at it and just tell them how nutso they are about it, and I think it'll stay on the sidelines.
Who do we call?
All right, thank you. The next one will be Representative Quam. Oh, I'm sorry. Everybody. Sorry. What was that? Go ahead and comment on that one. Sorry.
Oh, we did it. We all went through it. Yeah.
Next will be Senator Nelson. How much money dedicated to education is being used for CRT?
Well, first, hang on to that. I want to just say, when you want to, if you want to know who to contact, all you have to do is plug in your address and ask, who is my senator? And you'll find out who your senator is. And I would say, just to kind of stray just a second, note that the most important thing when you email a senator is to put your name and address at the top. We literally get hundreds upon hundreds of emails every day. And my office is probably just like everyone else's, is that I prioritize constituents. So if you have your name at the top and your address, those are the things that get the most attention, and that's where your voice has the most weight. Just so you know, my district now includes parts of Olmsted County and all of Dodge County, but as always, I consider all of Olmsted County my constituents when I'm listening to you. So now to the question on how much in the education funding is for CRT. I am sorry I do not have that number in my head, but I can definitely get that to you, and I'll let you disperse that. But I will tell you this about that education funding. So when I was education chair 3 years ago now, 3 and 4, I was education chair for 4 years from 17 through 2021, or through 2020. And at that point, the education budget, 2-year biennial budget, was $21 billion. I just want you to think about that a minute. And it continues to grow automatically in some cases. The one thing I want you to know is we are seeing fewer and fewer kids in our public schools. A host of reasons, partly because of the declining birth rate that's been happening for over a decade now. It's starting to pick up a bit. We're starting to see births increase. We've seen like 3rd graders now getting back to that level. And then also because of concerns like things about like CRT and falling reading scores. That's probably the biggest challenge, is that our kids don't know how to read. And that is a problem. If kids can read, they can master the world. But when they cannot read, their futures are severely limited, and we're seeing far too many kids who are not reading at grade level. I'm a former reading specialist, so let me just emphasize that again. The data is clear, especially by the end of 3rd grade. And if I will send it to Rick, Dr. Nolting, so you can get that exact number on CRT funding in the Senate bill, in the Senate Education bill.
I think the question about contacting the senator was, who are the Democrats that are flexible? And I think I would contact your BPOU, and that way, if they get questions given to us, we can, the senators can send it back, and that way it decreases the amount of, but talk to your BPOU. And CRT, they're spending money on CRT that wasn't meant for CRT, so I think it'll be tough for Carla to find out. COVID money was spent on CRT.
All right, the Olmsted County Republican Party. Go to the website. All right.
Or Dodge.
Or Dodge County. Wherever you live.
Basic political operating unit.
Political operating unit. All right, we have one for Representative Quam. Who wants to choose this one? Okay. Thank you. What is the status of the family medical leave bill, and is there a small business exception?
The small business exception, I think, is 0. My understanding is that what they're pushing is a employee. And that it's getting a lot of pushback from small cities, police departments, a lot of organizations that have thought that they would be exempt from things. And the House, well, let's just put it this way. I believe we're hearing it this coming week. And again, we'll try and push. It used to be 50 employees. We had amendments trying to get 25, change it from the 1. And I don't know how that one's going to go because, again, logic, reason, just doesn't seem to pass along to them because it sounds so good. You can soundbite this stuff and, oh, it sounds wonderful, but implementation is the problem. There are a lot of great ideas that they discovered when they tried to implement it, there were problems. And we're trying to let them know the problems ahead of time and how to avoid the worst of it. But frankly, they're not listening to me. Sorry about that.
So, is everybody familiar with their paid family medical leave proposal? You've heard, so the message has got out on that pretty well, I think. That's kind of what I gather as well, relatively speaking, compared to the rest of the bills. This is just one example of them trying to get government to pay people not to work. Now, let's think about socialism and communism that were talked about earlier. These are increments towards that. They're doing it in schools too. In the education bill, the people who are paras and janitors and those types of people, they want them to be paid for the 3 months that they're not working at the school. And they want to force the schools to pay that. You haven't heard about that. Another effort to pay people not to work. And of course, they're going to unionize all those people as well, if they haven't already. But the more and more we head this direction of paying people not to work and being beholden to government, dependent on government, that's what's going on here, folks. These are two big pieces, and we need to really, I mean, our country was built on individual freedom and work and perseverance and overcoming challenges and achieving. And you don't achieve when you don't work. And, you know, yeah, and the blind votes too. So, in the education bill, you guys, we've heard from our superintendents. You add all these different mandates, including the one we're going to pay people, tell schools they have to pay people not to work, and all the different mandates of paid family medical leave, and you know they got a minimum wage increase, all kinds of things that they want to force on schools. You add them all up, and the mandates are twice as much, or 2.5 times as much as the additional money that is given to them in the bill. So, I mean, this is, you know, in the Senate it was 5% the first year increase and 5% the second year, and then half of the education cross subsidy. Oodles and oodles and oodles of money. But you know what? All the mandates that they're putting in there is going to cost the school twice as much as the oodles and oodles and oodles of money. And the schools are going to be in deficit. And they don't care. We ask them what the cost is. They don't care. They want to force on their agenda.
Just to add a little bit more to that, don't want to preempt, but I'm just telling you, this is so, so, so important. So this paid family medical leave is a $2.1 billion, that's what the B folks, $1 billion tax on employees and employers. First of all, it's a whole new tax. That includes 200 state employees to start implementing this new tax, along with their government salaries and perhaps pensions as well. And here's the problem. Think about all of the employers who, how do those certain employers get their money? Let's talk about the schools. Where do they get their money? They get it from the state government, the federal government, and you, property tax holders. All right? The counties, where do they get their money? From you and the other governments. How about your cities? Where do they get their money? From you and the other governments. Now here is the issue. Every one of those entities, the schools, the counties, and the cities, have all tried to identify how much more it's going to cost them to implement paid family medical leave. And every one of them thinks it will increase by 1% the tax levy. So if it were, you could do the math, and I asked them to do the math. The counties, it looks like it will increase county expenses $60 million a year. The counties and the cities each said it would increase their costs by $60 million a year. And the school districts have done something I've never seen in 15 years legislating. School districts, both the smallest ones in my district and one of our larger districts like Rochester School District, they have taken out spreadsheets. They have itemized out all of the mandates that are coming forth out of this legislature. And they've added them all up, and as Senator Drazkowski said, they have examined how much it would cost compared to the amount of the Senate education bill, which was even more than the tax bill. And they are losing money, folks. Some school districts went so far as to say, the Rochester Public Schools said, this amount of money is all that we had intended to pay for teacher salary increases. Other school districts said, especially some of my smaller school districts, they said, this is going to cost me 5 teachers. I'm not going to be able to hire as many teachers. So this is, and it's a one-size-government-fits-all mandate when most of our, many of our businesses are offering the kind of paid family leave that their employers want. But this one says, oh, that's not good enough. Even though so the employers are going to be paying more, employees are going to be paying more for a leave that doesn't fit them as well. It's a very bad policy.
Thank you. Next question for Senator Drazkowski. Would you please? Various reports tell us we conservative Republicans were outspent 10-1 in campaigns statewide in 2022. Very large amounts come from super PACs, entities outside Minnesota. Sadly, it funds lots of untruthful, misleading ads that sway the votes of the uninformed voters. Aside from pleading for donations, what creative ideas do you have to counteract this imbalance?
Well, I don't have any. I'm always honest. I can tell you that 23 out of the top 400 billionaires contributed to the Democrats the last election. I just saw that the other day, including Soros and others. And the amount that the unions, the public sector unions, have contributed in Minnesota was about $6 million last election. And 10-1 is the number. We're outspent 10-1. You know, it begins with beating on the pots and pans and letting people know what they have. Letting them know that we got to sound the alarm and let them know that Minnesota is about to go over the edge. And if we don't do that, we're not going to raise money. Now, in terms of mechanically what we need to do differently, I don't have the answers, but we have to figure it out. That's all I can say. Maybe these two have some great ideas, but we've got to do better than we have. We've got to raise more than we have. But money's not all of it either. When you're right on the issues, you can win in the face of a whole bunch of money. But it really comes down to us re-strategizing our approach to getting the ballots in the ballot box the way the Democrats do. We don't have to do it illegally like Levan Mohammed did when he went around paying people for ballots and putting them in his car and then dumping them in the box. But we can do it legally, and we can beat them because we were this close. We were 187 votes in one Senate district, close to winning that Senate district in the face of what they were doing. So if we're that close and we can recalculate, re-strategize, and figure out how to get the ballots in the box and get that guy down at the end of the road that we know that never votes in, and we know he's going to vote with us. We got to get his ballot in the box. That's the key. If we get the ballots in the box, they can spend as much money on, you know, showing Representative Finke and his transgender BS to anybody they want to, and it won't matter.
I think you asked some other ideas on that, or maybe few ideas. That is a huge issue. And just to add a little bit more to that, you know, as has been alluded to up here, you know, good ideas do win out in the court of public opinion. But it requires a couple things. Number one, we have to get those good ideas out there. And that's where there is a lot of power in this room. There's a lot of power in this room, and there's a lot of power with each and every one of you to do just like you're doing today, to take a little bit of time to kind of understand the issues. And I'm not saying beat your unlike-minded friends over the head with a frying pan, but I'm saying in the course of conversation and being a friendly neighbor, you could share a few things that might make them a little more thinking about what the real issues are. And then just to go back to education a minute, it means that we really have to have critical thinkers. So a lot of the stuff coming out that's put out on social media, YouTube, if people were critical thinkers, they would be asking some serious questions and thinking this doesn't sound right. And I would say also, having been, thankfully not in 2022, but in 2020, I was one of those nationally targeted races. And I do want you to know all that money is horrible. It was probably one of the most difficult things for a candidate and her family to go through, to have over 2 million, I think it was $2.3 million of lies spread about you in a very narrow area. And so, yeah, good ideas went out. We need critical thinkers, and then we need boots on the ground, just like you. So thank you.
I was just going to add, Bloomberg targeted, I was one of the 11 targeted. Use the mic, please.
I was one of the 11 targeted House races by Bloomberg about 3-4 races ago. I frequently have my opponents outspend me about 10 to 1. But frankly, talking to people and being out there and not afraid to interact, I think has helped. Plus, I've been around long enough to where people sort of know me. But you've got groups with 100, 200, 300 people that are meeting about issues and different things. And when they share across social media, they reach thousands, if not tens of thousands. So that is one way you amplify your voice. And the other thing is sometimes asking the right question, instead of, oh, this is the truth, sometimes the person reacts better if you ask the right question to get them thinking, and then they realize on their own, yeah, that's not going to work. So you know the individuals you interact with better than I do or any of us up here. And that's how you help make a difference. And maybe the question is because they see one of us say something and they catch a soundbite. You're the ones that can add the context. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next we have a question for all.
Say, Rick, if I could intercept here just a moment.
Sure.
So Senator Nelson talked about me beating somebody over the head with a frying pan. That's not what I said. What I said was beating the frying pan. For those of us from the rural area, we know what that means is you bring people into dinner by beating on the frying pans, Senator Nelson. Okay, just helping you.
I'm not sure, what I would tell you...
We really can't allow questions from the floor. So this is a question. Contact your senator and representative directly. What do they mean by carbon-free in 2040? That's for all of you.
Well, where to start? I think it is a pipe dream. It's not even, they believe that we will have no, well, it depends. They could mean that we have net zero carbon emissions, or we have no carbon emissions. Either way, I would just say it's not going to happen. It's impossible, especially when the biggest supporters of carbon-free by 2040 are often the same people who say we cannot have nuclear energy. That doesn't make sense. And they're also the same ones who typically say, and we cannot have big hydro as clean energy either. So I don't see it happening. Feels to me more like a campaign promise, a bit of a gimmick, but unfortunately it's law now. And and also the federal level's pushing this as well as here in the state. And so they're really trying to push out your combustible engines, make sure that everyone drives an electric vehicle. And Terry, where were we yesterday? You can't speak to the audience, but we were just somewhere yesterday where we saw all of these electric vehicle charging stations being put down a whole block. I think it's in Rochester here. And so they're really using government money, your money, large sums of money to try and influence people's behavior. But the fact of the matter is this. No matter what the law says, no matter how many billions or trillions of dollars come from the federal government for carbon-free by 2040, there's just a couple facts. We cannot move faster than innovations allow. It's impossible. And we cannot move faster than what Minnesotans can afford. So I'd say, hang on, but I think that revolution is coming, but certainly not at the speed at which the government is trying to force.
Yeah, they really just mean their type of energy. That's what it is. It's solar and it's wind, and they won't let nuclear be part of it. Nuclear is carbon free. We had several amendments to do that. That's not what they want. They want to limit it to wind and solar. That's their stuff, and you know, petroleum's evil according to them, and they believe in, you know, the whole anthropogenic global warming stuff, although they call it something else now because that was no longer popular. Anyway, it's their types of electricity, which will not make our world go around.
Well, if the bill that went through the Senate Friday happened last year, I would have said, what are they smoking? Because that or they, yeah. It comes down to the fact that the numbers don't add up. And it's even greater. I've had people say, well, we want to not have mining of rare earths in northern Minnesota. And I said, well, right now, they're mining them in other parts of the world. And if you want to save the planet, you would care that we would do it better here than there. Because there's no way there are even enough being produced now of those rare earths that go into making the batteries and the electric vehicles and solar panels, etc., to be able to reach that here. And so it just doesn't work. You can't make an omelet without eggs. And when we had the egg shortage, a lot of people went without omelets. So real life logic and numbers are the thing that they don't realize.
Thank you. Now we'll get a question here for Senator Nelson. Please pick one, sir. Thank you. Question reads, with losing the Senate and the House and the governor's office, what is the plan for the Republican Party to win new voters, younger voters, suburb moms, and city voters?
Well, believe me, there's been a lot of talk and thinking about that. Number one, just as I said, I believe good ideas win out in the court of public opinion. So let's make sure that we have good ideas. The ideas about the problems that people are concerned about, like skyrocketing inflation, like making sure that our streets are safe, making sure that our kids are getting a great education so that their futures are open to them and being able to think for themselves, not being told how to think or what to think. So that's one thing, so good ideas, but then we have to get great candidates. And so we need to get people who are willing to put themselves through the gauntlet that you're kind of seeing right now. And it means their families too. I think it's harder on the families than it is on the electeds, by the way. So, you know, please give your love to all of our family members who put up with a lot, not only for us to be gone and busy, but sometimes they get some of that abuse that we do too, and they didn't sign up for this. So good candidates. My rule of thumb is this. I want to get the most conservative candidate that can win. If they cannot win, it doesn't matter. It's just talk over coffee. But we're in a very serious place right now, and we have to be very serious about looking for candidates who understand the issues and who are conservative, believe in our capitalistic form of government, believe in limited government, empowering individuals. We could go on and on. And then we have to help them win and run. And that's where all of you get involved. But good ideas, great candidates, and then it's people like you. And I know many of you have helped me many times over the years in many ways. And we need to do that for whatever upcoming candidates we have as well.
Thank you. Next question is for Representative Kwong. Sir, did you pick one, please? Take the top one. Okay, I'll take the top one. Is this a good time to promote a one bill / one topic bill, preventing sneaking in additional items?
Well, omnibus is illegal in Minnesota.
The biggest issue with actually abiding by what we're supposed to be doing is the fact that who is ever in the majority likes to put things together so they can get the appropriate word for stuff you pick up after your dog with, in with something that's, people like. That's why you look at the title of a bill, it sounds great. You dig in, and there's some stuff, why is it in this bill? And then you sort of realize why it's in there is because it wouldn't pass on its own. And sometimes that's because if it's close between the House and the Senate, each chamber, if one's close, one vote different, then what you're trying to do is play with, the best example is the election bill. They have the national popular vote in one, and they are pushing ranked choice vote in the other. So that when conference committee, they can put all this stuff together. So you have the worst of the worst. And I would love to see this session, a conference committee report fail because they combine so much stuff together that you couldn't power wash it off.
Thank you. Now, Senator Drazkowski. Yes. Are there any moderate Democrats? And then part two, can any of the bills be repealed or reversed, or how does that work? Are you working on that now? So I'll just hand you this because
there are moderate Democrats in Minnesota. There aren't too many in the Minnesota legislature.
The moderates voted for the radicals.
So in the Minnesota Senate, there's 4 Democrats that you could consider people who are in districts where they should be considering at least moderate positions, if not sometimes or many times voting with us. That is Senator Haschel up in St. Louis and Cook and Koochiching counties. Senator Kupek, who is in Clay County, Clay and parts of Becker County, so he's from Moorhead. Senator Seeberger, she is from Hastings and Cottage Grove. And Senator Putnam, who is from St. Cloud. Those are the 4, and they're all much more moderate than kind of the whatever you want to call the rest of them. They are more moderate, well, but they are also all pretty ideologically driven. Senator Haschel is a true believer, and he is in a rural district, and he should be, given his district, he should be voting more conservative than some of the Republicans in our caucus.
So there are no moderates.
But he's not, because he's a true believer and he wants to, you know, I don't know, he thinks he's going to run for Congress someday or something. The rest of the question, what was the rest of the question, Rick? I don't have my cheaters on.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, well, we have to, yeah, can they be repealed? Can we reverse the direction? Can we change the direction of the river as it's going now? The only way to do that is to have elections. And that begins in 2024. We have to put Representative Quam back in the majority. And when that happens, we will stop the river, okay? And it will become a lake at that point. And then another election in 2026 is an opportunity to start to bring it back the other way again. Until we do that, we're playing defense, the pucks are coming at us, and we got to keep them out of the net.
Thank you. Now a question for all. That one? Okay. Please give information on Minnesota Silence the Speech Bill that would take First Amendment rights.
I am not aware of that bill. I don't know that it's in the Senate. Maybe I'll pass it over to Representative Quam.
That's a problem. That is part of one of the omnibus bills of where if I'm getting it correctly with taking on the same thing, they have a entity that's going to be collecting reports from the public about speech that might hurt my feelings. And they want to use that and geographically look at, in case they've got maybe part of Olmsted County that has a high degree of this hurtful speaking, so that we can maybe have governmental entities interject to make sure that the snowflakes don't melt and it's safe. We tried many amendments to fix it, but basically it's saying we're going to start collecting, and no agency asked for this. We're going to collect this information so we can use it for something in the future that is good. I think the Democratic Socialist Party of Germany did a certain thing similar to that before. I know in Russia and other countries they do this, so I think it's laying the grounds for something really bad.
They do it in Canada.
Yeah, I know.
Is this the bill that they were talking about on Fox News recently?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, they want to weaponize the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. That was what they want to do with that. And yeah, we're turning government into the hurt feelings report, capital, if you will.
All right, next one will be for Senator Nelson. Sir? Just pick one. Take a deep drag here. How will legalizing recreational marijuana affect public health and safety?
Oh my gosh. I happen to be the Republican lead on weed. It was my job on Friday to try and beat this bill down. Now, obviously they had their votes lined up, or they thought they did, then they got that $10 million amendment, then they got it passed, but here's the facts. Seriously, this is one of the most devastating bills that I can imagine, and the governor is planning to sign it into law. First, the federal government still considers this a Schedule I substance. That means no matter what Minnesota says, according to the federal government, it is a Schedule I drug. That means banks can't lend to it. So guess who is going to prop up this new industry, this Minnesota industry? You are. That's exactly right. It's taxpayer dollars that are going to be confiscated from you to fund, to become like venture capitalists, basically, to fund addiction for profit industries. That's what's happening. Then, of course, the biggest thing, public safety. Our police, our sheriffs are adamantly against this because there is no test. There's no test to test for impaired driving. All right? True. So it's a problem. You can look, we should be looking to our neighbors who have already made this mistake and learn from them, but we are not. Colorado has seen a 139% increase in traffic accidents since marijuana was legalized. Colorado, some people said, well, we need the tax money, Senator Nelson. Well, we know that's not true because we have a massive surplus. But even if we did need the tax money, I'm just telling you, this isn't it, folks. Colorado spends over $4 to remedy the effects of legalized marijuana for every dollar they bring in. And then because we tax it, and because there's quite a convoluted licensure and regulatory environment for these new addiction for profit industries to go through, it's more than what's on the black market. So we are not going to dry up the black market. And then, of course, you've heard from all of your locals, they can't even determine where or if there should be a marijuana dispensary in their city. No local control. We even tried to say, oh, it can't be within 500 feet of a school. No, they have no control. So this is a bad, bad piece of legislation all around. There's nothing good about it. It's dangerous for health, and safety.
The cartels are going to take it over.
Yes, they are.
Next, be Representative Kwong.
Cartels already have it.
Why don't Republicans stick together?
I've been involved for a long time, and we're passionate, we care about things. And oftentimes, in your family, you might have one thing you disagree on, and you can get into an argument. What we have not been able to do compared to the Democrats is, here is where we're going to go. And in order to get there, we're going to have to work together. And they will break off in groups to do functions to get there, so they're not mixing people are going to get into an argument doing it. And so some of it is the organizational. I think the other part is we're individuals and independent. We're not lemmings following orders. When we have a majority, we tend to have more independence in our majority. But when they've got a majority in a chamber, They follow lockstep, and I'm not sure what, I don't think they've got better parenting skills. I think they just are more dominating, or maybe it's that we're independent and they feel better being part of a group that they're following the leader. You know, human science is tough, but it comes down to putting a priority that's the group priority above yourself and focusing outward instead of inward more. And I will pass it on for the next question.
All right, Senator Drazkowski's question next. Sheriff. That one? Okay. What is happening with tax relief for home health care, senior citizens to be able to stay in their homes? And that includes property taxes, income tax on Social Security, home health care, assisted living.
Before I get to that, I'm going to struggle with anything specific to that, but back to Representative Quam's question, you know, liberals are collectivists, and they operate collectively, and they're comfortable doing that. And we don't do that very well. So, anyway, I just think they're wired that way. They're wired to think collectively. They worship at the altar of government, and we got to conform this government for our group, and we're all in a group, and let's be in the group. And they're good at being in the group. And our guys and gals are good at working and doing independent things, and taking care of business. On their own, for them and their family. I'm just going to take this question just to talk about, I don't know if there's, Senator Nelson, do you know anything specifically for them? Is there something in the tax bill? I'm on the tax committee as well. I can tell you that the tax bill before the Senate is a horrible piece of garbage. They added a $1.2 billion brand new tax, corporate tax, that is going to chase companies out of Minnesota. They just dropped it on our desk on Thursday, and here you go. There was no hearing or anything. Here's the tax, and they put it in the tax bill. $1.2 billion. Now, that tax bill, the fact that they were only able to repeal 39% of the income tax on Social Security, 39% is what they repeal in that bill of the income tax on Social Security, because they so much envy people who achieve. They so much do, and they hate rich people. They want to beat the tar out of rich people. They want to grab that money and redistribute it and give it to other people, and that's what this tax bill does. It takes the money and it gives it to people with kids. It gives it to there is a dependent care credit in the bill, now that I'm thinking about it. So they take money from people who are earning it either through maybe their Social Security income tax or this brand new corporate tax, and they redistribute it to other groups of people. And if you happen to be a home health care provider who has people who benefit from the independent or the dependent care credit for seniors or kids, guess what? You're going to benefit from that. But that's a redistribution of wealth. We don't believe in that. You know what else they do in the bill? About 5 or 6 different categories of tax refunds they allow ITINs to be used. So illegal aliens can come in and take our money through our income tax system. That's in the bill. This is a horrible bill, and I just can't believe we have it before us. And I can't believe they did it. They increased the size of the bill from $3 billion to $4 billion. We're still figuring the numbers out. A whole bunch of money for, a whole bunch of money for child credits. And God bless you if you have kids. Guess what? You're gonna you're gonna get more money from the income tax system because of this. But that wasn't because you earned the money. It's because they took it from somebody else.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. It'll be a question for all of you. And I'm going to call on Chris Brandt, who has taken advantage and exercised his right to use our healthcare system lately. That one right there, okay. He has a beautiful chartreuse cast on his leg. What are the odds of Senate File 1723 becoming law? License required for firearms ownership, assault weapons, quote unquote, a ban and registration, etc.
Start with our house then. Do that.
Well, yeah, we should find out.
Can we hear it again?
What they got to control.
Senate File, it says 1723.
Oh, is that the guy with the bow tie, Bill? John Marty, okay, yeah. That's a doozy. I haven't read it since last year, but he brought it back again this year. They're not gonna enact that one into law, but they actually require you to license your firearm.
It's a registration then.
Yeah, I mean, owning a firearm is gonna have more control over it than, it already does, but we're making it harder to own a firearm, and we're making it easier to cheat in voting at the same time. So if I remember right, it's like an omnibus gun control bill Senator Marty's got. So it's got the licensing part. It's got, I think, red flags and universal background checks are in there as well. But there's about 4 or 5 things. There's other items floating around the Capitol, and they may be in that bill. One is to not allow people to carry at the Capitol. And some of us carry at the Capitol, some of us have the entire time we've been there. And so it's like, why? They're also building an addition to the state office building. This probably isn't in any questions, but they're going to increase the size of the state office building by 57% without a vote of the legislature to do it. They've put things in law over time in secret places in order to make this happen, and it was triggered, and it's kind of like, do you remember in the old westerns when they used to go with a barrel of gunpowder and they used to make a little trail, and then go over here and then it was like boom over there? It's like they laid the trail out over time, and it was lit just by a single rules committee vote in the Minnesota House back in November or December, and they had it all, John, they had it all laid out. And so now the gunpowder's going down there, and it's going to happen without the legislature voting. What got me to that, and you guys wonder, how did I get to that from gun control, is I believe they're going to want to build metal detectors probably in that as part of their security plan. And so some of that's coming. As long as Democrats are in control, these are the things that are going to happen. They're going to continue to build them in. We just got to be ever vigilant. We have to be engaged. So if they bring that gun control as part of the public safety bill in front of the Senate, we need all you guys up there to let them know that we can't have that. Thank you.
We'll save Representative Quam, because I think you all just passed this, I think, off the House floor. These bills have not come to the Senate floor yet. Just say a couple overarching things, because they have come to the Senate floor over the years in different ways, like stand your ground, concealed carry, things I supported both in the House and in the Senate. This particular bill, I don't have all the details on that one, but just as an overarching, what we have to understand is the idea of limiting the rights of law-abiding citizens to prevent criminal activity. The thing is, criminals don't obey the laws. So that's the challenge. It's just it's a very much a challenge. And then we also have some of the things that I've heard much about, which I doubt that they're in this bill, but this is a federal thing, and this has to do with about reclassifying certain guns as short-barreled rifles, and how this is going to make so many Americans felons because there's a reclassification by the federal government of what a particular gun is. So I think there's just a number of issues there. We do have challenges in the Senate, I would say, although the 4 senators that we've chatted about, the Democrat senators, they should be standing for Second Amendment rights. But so far, we've not seen them, break away from their caucus, and maybe that's why it hasn't been on the Senate floor yet. Perhaps they don't have the votes yet. But I'll look forward to hearing from Representative Quam about, I think, what just happened in the House. I believe they have either just passed a firearms bill.
Okay, the omnibus bill contained, the House contained some of the stuff. And we had an amendment for standard ground. Obviously, the majority didn't take it. We had an amendment that defined family in the broad sense they used for the 12-week the 12-week off bill. Because in there, you really don't, it can include a friend or neighbor besides all your in-laws, all of your relatives, as a reason for you to take 12 weeks off to take care of someone. So we said, well, let's use that definition for the background check, because frankly what they want is if my brother visits from Iowa and I lend him a shotgun to go hunting on the family farm, then there'd need to be a background check. And I thought that was sort of silly. So we said, okay, let's make it so that if you're not, if it's family and they're coming up, it could be your great-grandfather's rifle. And maybe you don't go hunting anymore, and you've got a cousin that is starting to hunt, or some relative like that. You ought to be able to have that as a gift and not do a background check. And they also have where you have to keep this basically in perpetuity if you sell something, so that if it ends up being in somebody's hands that uses it for a crime. So this is if you're going to sell it to someone else, and they can come back to you and you can be charged because that weapon which you sold to them was used in a crime. We tried to put a limit on that, but nope. You have to have that piece of paper forever to prove that you sold it so many years ago and you weren't aware or part of a crime. A lot of stupid stuff.
Thank you. Well, we've come to the end of our time. Becky Springer, the head of the events team that put this together, is coming up and make final announcements.
Thank you all for coming. Could we have a round of applause for our two I think we learned a lot here today, but I know there's a whole lot more we could have been told about and learned. But thank you again for coming out for a couple of hours here. Thank you all for attending as well. And I have a few quick thank yous for Rick Nolting, who was our moderator. I would like a round of applause for him as well. Thank you, Deborah, Naomi, Bob Ranfranz for the invocation and the pledge. David, Andrea, Sarah Bertzinger back there, she put the flyer together that hopefully a lot of you saw. either on social media or on your own, you know, going here and there. They were on bulletin boards all throughout Rochester and then some. Terry and Linda Husser over there, Tim Dunlap and Ruth Bennett who helped check in over there as well. John Whalen back there, Scott Spindler, and I think least but not last, the Eagles Club for allowing us to do this today. So on the tables, there's a green piece of paper that has some of the upcoming summer events on there. Please put on your calendar, I know it's far into the future, but we have caucus for the Republican Party on Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. The locations have been secured for that. So make sure you get that on your calendar. You will want to come out. As we see and hear, there's a lot that we need to be participating in so that the river becomes a lake, that becomes a stream, that becomes a puddle, right? Okay. All right. Bob has one quick announcement here, and then have a great rest of your afternoon and evening and weekend.
So we heard tonight that the Democratic machine has 10 to 1 times money than the Republicans would have. That, you know, we have a good message. But I just want to let you know, if anyone here is from Olmsted County and you want to help our local Republican party, there's a way you can do that and it won't cost you a cent. So here's what could happen if you want to be involved. I got some envelopes. So this is how it works. If you're a single person and you want to write a $50 check to the Olmsted County Republican Party, or if you're a couple and you want to write a check for $100 to Olmsted County Republican Party, you can give that or send it to our treasurer, and the address is on this envelope. Once she receives that money, she'll send you a receipt for your 50 for an individual or 100 if you're a couple. She'll also send you a form from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. You take that receipt, fill out that form, and the Minnesota Department of Revenue will send you the exact amount of money that you gave. So you can help the local Republican Party here if you want to by just writing either a $50 check or a $100 check for a couple. And if anybody here wants to do that, I've got some envelopes. If you raise your hand, I can actually come and hand you one of you if you'd like to do that. This is just our local GOP party, right, Gail? Well, you can do it in your own county. Yeah, any county that you're in. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire